Sorry.
I wouldn't like to reach from here to
I'm
turn it off.
standing here like a lemon.
My mum's 83 and I've decided, I told her when I spoke to her last, I want you to start saying ace when something's good around your friends. Because it would be so cool. It'd be so cool, wouldn't it?
And it's an 80... No, it's not. It's an 85-15, so 80...
Now bear in mind this is in a church and
Yes.
the vicar is sat on the front row.
Right.
She sang, I'm just a girl who can't say no.
Last section, I'm trying to find the other end of my needle and I'm failing. Because I've got so much fabric. Where's the other end of my needle? Right, okay. I found it, yay!
So go back and do that again and watch the branch.
It looks a bit like pond water. In the nicest sense. It's not a very good start, is it? It's totally got caught on my poor binder. Buddy, don't panic, Mr. Mannering.
Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show featuring my favourite blanket.
Yes.
And not quite the end of summer.
No.
Because there's a sting in the tail, but we're not going to complain.
No.
Because it's been lovely all year, and we know that so many of you, it's not been so lovely.
Yeah.
It's been extremely warm, hasn't it?
It has.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it still is across the world.
Yes. Finally, some of that heat has arrived.
Has arrived here. We're having a really warm week this week.
But that's okay, because the summer is nearly over.
It is.
The schools have returned.
They have.
Thank goodness. You know when things are becoming stir crazy, when Kay and I were taking the duvet cover off the other day, and Kay said, do it backwards, because it's important that it's inside out so that when we put it back on it's easier. So I turned around and did it with my hands like this.
I didn't even notice. That's how, zoned out I've been. I didn't even notice that you were doing that, so the joke was kind of lost. You must have thought, well...
Well, no, it always sort of makes me laugh all the more when things like that happen.
I think I'm just whenever it's duvet day, laundry day, it's just a nightmare, because king-size duvets are just huge, aren't they?
Also, as well, when the summer's getting long, because Kay has a candle it smells of mint. I've been banned of making the joke of when she says, oh, it's my mint candle, I say, oh, do you like it very much? Because in the 80s, if you like something, you would say it was mint. And we were sat the other day, Kay was looking at a notepad, a garden notepad. Actually, speaking of gardens, don't miss our radio show next week where we're going to be talking about our garden adventure. Yeah. But Kay was looking through her notepad and she found this recipe for mint vegetables. And she kept going, mint vegetables. And I could see in her mind she was thinking, I wonder how they make the vegetables mint. But in my mind, I'm dying with laughter.
I knew because I knew that's what you were thinking. I thought, I'm not going to look at him because he's going to do that joke that's just so not funny anymore.
I was already laughing in my head. And that was enough for me. We established the other day, was it you I was talking to, or was it our daughter Bryony? I think it was you. Did I say ace to you?
Yes, you said it to me. Bryony wasn't there.
Yes. I've decided we've got to bring it back.
Ace.
And in fact, I've decided it so much, I've told... How old's my mum now? 80?
83, I think.
What year is it?
She was born in 1940.
And the year is?
She'll be 83 at Christmas.
Thank you so much for your help, caller. So, yes, my mum's 83 and I've decided, I told her when I spoke to her last, I want you to start saying ace when something's good around your friends. Because it would be so cool. It'd be so cool, wouldn't it? If all these octogenarians started saying ace when something was good. I think it would make them look really young and hip.
I think it would too. Your mum will do that, though.
Yeah, she will.
The others will probably look at her as if she's gone absolutely more bonkers than she is. But,
I'll tell you a quick story about my mum. They decided to have a lovely evening of song and dance at their local church. This is about 10 years ago.
Oh, right, okay.
And so everyone did a turn. That's an old-fashioned Yorkshire expression for getting up and doing an act.
Yeah.
So everyone's getting up and doing something with that. My mum gets up and does a hornpipe up and down the aisle, and then she decides to sing a song. Now, bear in mind, this is in a church, and
Yes.
the vicar is sat on the front row.
Right.
She sang, "I'm just a girl who can't say no."
Right.
I mean, thankfully, the vicar took it in the best possible taste.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everything was lovely.
That would be fun to see, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I
And
know.
I'd have liked to have seen that.
I reckon I'd be willing to bet that's the first time in history anyone has ever sung "I'm just a girl who can't say no" in a church.
In a church.
It's marvellous. Now, as the summer came to an end, we decided it was time to watch a summer blockbuster. So we thought we'd pop on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
The new one.
Now,
Have you seen it?
what an interesting film, because first of all, I would say I think Harrison Ford looks absolutely marvellous for a man in his 80s.
He looked great, you know, when in the bits where they hadn't de-aged him.
Yeah.
In the normal bits. Yeah, it was running around and, you know,
And
looked great.
so much of that film I definitely enjoyed more than The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But there were also huge parts of that film
Yeah.
which were just a bit weird.
Yeah. I didn't really enjoy it, if I'm honest.
Well, Crystal Skull was dreadful.
I didn't mind the Crystal Skull, actually. I don't know.
Let's watch them back to back again.
The story's really daft, isn't it? And the ending is really, really daft.
Are they from space? No.
Yeah.
The space between the spaces.
That is, yeah, what are you talking about, really, with that? You know, that is strange. But there was lots of things about this new one that I didn't like.
Well, I thought it was okay. I thought everything was going fine. I thought that it then they go back in time.
Time travel, I thought, yes, great.
Cool.
Love that.
Really into that. And then gets even better. It goes back to possibly my favourite time in history, Roman and Greek history. I'm like, yes.
It did.
And then we won't spoil the end.
No.
But then it just ended.
Yeah.
And then it was like...
And it was like, why did they do that? Why did that happen?
It got to the precipice of an epic third act. You know, the big third act where there's a great big payoff and you come out of the cinema thinking, yeah, great. And it didn't. It's like there was no third act.
No, and I didn't like the cinematography, I've got to say. I didn't like the way it was filmed. It was too dark, as always.
Yeah, that is the problem with all cinematography today.
And
it's a bit like how everyone paints everything grey
I just turn
now.
off at the beginning. I just turn off. Yeah, they do. All the colours are like subdued.
But isn't it funny though? But because it's the same out in the world too, isn't it? There's a real popularity in the world with sort of grey colours, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. I was looking at houses for sale the other day because I just do randomly. And I saw this house, actually. It's just round the corner from us. I like to nosy at houses that have sold near us. I think we all do that, don't we? And every single piece of furniture, carpet, kitchen cabinets, flooring was some shade of grey in this house. How
many shades of grey do you think there was, Kate?
Well, there was more than 50, I would say. I was like, what is going on? Can you...
But then, interesting then to make the link into how in filmmaking there seems to be this huge popularity now to do everything in the dark.
Yeah.
It's so
it's so like...
But another really interesting...
I just cannot be doing with it.
An interesting comparison is the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds could see everything.
Yes.
Nice and light, looking great.
Yes.
Second season,
Can't see a thing.
Rubbish. And it's such a shame when that happens because, you know, we were just watching, and we won't spoil this because this was, there's lots of spoilers or potential spoilers for the radio show.
Oh, yes.
Did you hear our last radio show where we were talking about Pride and Prejudice?
Yes.
Well, the challenge is for me to watch it and to give my opinion, which we'll be doing on a future radio show. Don't miss it because it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Because I've started watching it and I have lots of opinion.
Yes.
But watching that, dark room,
yes,
lit by candle, could see everything.
Could see everything. You know, just because they only had candles to light their rooms in those days does not mean we want to see what it actually looked like.
Do you know?
It's not necessary, is it?
I remember reading a newspaper article, and I know when this fashion really kicked off on TV, it was Poldark.
Oh, right, which I never watched.
Poldark was very much of the opinion that people who were producing that, well, that's the light they had at the time, so that's the light we're going to film with.
Oh, I can't. If I find it so depressing, really, that's what they think people want to watch, and maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just us.
No, it isn't. We've spoken about this before on our Patreon exclusive show. We quite often talk about what we've been watching, and everyone seems to get frustrated about overly dark and also bad sound as well.
Bad sound.
We won't go into the Bane conversation again.
Gosh,
from Batman.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a mask on. Of course, you wouldn't be able to hear him speak. Anyway, look, we're not here to talk about superheroes. You'll
Absolutely
be thrilled
not.
to hear. Yes, we're here to talk about some marvellous projects and also to show you something finished by me.
And
Yes.
I've launched a new pattern.
Oh, I didn't even realise. So, without further ado, I think it's time that I should say, Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
Yes. So, yes, the first thing on my needles it is on my needles, but I'm also going to talk about something that's off my needles because it's my reading shawl. Now, I'm going to show you the one that is currently on my needles, which I did show you last time, but I have done quite a bit of work on it. So I'm going to show you and talk about the hat. But in the last couple of weeks...
So you've launched the reading shawl in between the last show and this show?
I have indeed. I put the pattern out on the 1st of September.
This changes everything.
I launched this pattern on the 1st of September. So thank you to everybody who has already purchased it. I'm really, really grateful. And I'm so thrilled that you're all excited to be knitting up your own shawls. So this shawl, I'll show you the one that is the finished one that you see in the pattern. And you've seen this before as a finished item, but I'll just show you again. You might not have seen that episode. So this is my reading shawl, and it is called, if you're searching for it on Ravelry or Lovecrafts, it is called My Reading Shawl. And the reason I've called it that is for two reasons. One is because it is my reading shawl, but also there were a number of other shawls called reading shawl on Ravelry, so just to avoid confusion and to make it easier to search for, that's why I've just added my. So if you just search my reading shawl, and of course Dan will link it. Is that what you were just going to say?
No, I was going to say the two reasons should be, the first one is the reason you said, and the second one should be when you've knitted it, it'll be your reading shawl.
It will be my reading shawl. It'll be yours, and therefore my. Oh, you know what I mean.
Just think of it literally.
Yes, you know what I mean. So yeah, here is the one that you see in the pattern. This is the completed shawl. It's humongous, which is what I wanted. So it's a triangular shawl, knitting garter stitch, and it has a beautiful picot edge. There you go. You see that edging? Really, really pretty. I knit mine using an advent calendar of 20-gram mini skeins. So I had 24 20-gram fingering weight mini skeins, and then this contrast colour I dyed myself. So you'd need 4 100-gram skeins of fingering weight in your contrast colour. You don't use all of that 400 grams. I think I used for this one, I used round about 340 grams, something like that. So you will have plenty with 400 grams. And then you'll need, you don't need mini skeins, of course. You could just use leftovers that you've got in your stash of the equivalent yardage. So I've noted all of the yardages and everything in the pattern and on the Ravelry pattern page. In Lovecrafts, I have put some details in the description, but you're very limited to the amount of words that you can actually type in Lovecrafts. So I ran out of word spacage.
Like Twitter, or X as they call it now.
Oh, don't even. I ran out of space, so I had to sort of condense some of the information. I do find that really limiting on Lovecraft, I've got to say. In fact, I find their whole system with regards to putting patterns on there for sale a little bit antiquated and not really very flexible. But it's there as an alternative because I know, of course, not everybody uses Ravelry, and I don't want to disadvantage anybody that doesn't. So you can absolutely purchase it on Lovecrafts, and all the information is there that you actually need. It's just that I couldn't put in everything, that I did in terms of the finer details that are on the Ravelry page. But yeah, of course you can use leftovers if you've not got mini skeins. You can also, I know that some people like to use a DK in place of, because this shawl is knitted with 2 strands of fingering weight held together, which does equate to about a DK weight. So I know that a lot of people like to substitute in a DK. You can absolutely do that. You've just got to make sure you've got the correct yardage. So don't go by weight if you're using DK, because 100 grams of DK is not the yardage that 100 grams of fingering weight is. So just make sure you've got the yardage that you need if you're using DK. So yeah, this is my reading shawl. And I've got my second one on the needle. So the first one is for me. This one that I'm knitting is for Bryony, and the intention for this is that I'm going to give it to her on her birthday this year. But the idea is, I suppose, that it's for her kind of future life. Yeah, whatever she does after she finishes this bit of studying that she's into now. But here we go. This is my second reading shawl, and this one, Bryony wanted kind of purples, blues, greens. She loves those sort of autumnal-ish colours. So I pulled out loads of minis. A lot of these minis are Pixie yarn. With my first shawl, I used an advent calendar from Pixie Yarn. I love her yarns, Sophie's yarns. And she's not doing an advent calendar this year, but she is through the year doing like these seasonal mini packs. So you could actually collect those and use those if you wanted to use Pixie yarns. Of course, you don't have to. You can use whatever you want to. I do like her minis, because the variegated ones I love, because particularly with the advent calendar, they were all random. You know, it didn't follow like a gradient or anything like that. I just like randomness with an advent calendar. But of course, using a gradient for this would work beautifully. So here's where I'm up to with Bryony's. I've just put in the 8th section, so there's sort of 12 sections altogether, and there's 2 stripes in each of those sections, so 24 altogether. So this is the section I've just done. So I think I was just starting this sort of purpley blue stripe last time. I've got through that contrast section, I've got through the next colour, which is this beautiful pale blue with all those speckles. And then I've also finished the next contrast section. So I'm ready to start now section 9. And I'm going to be using these 2, which I know that this speckled one, I'm pretty sure that one is Pixie Yarns. I think this one might be, but I'm not certain. But I'm going to be holding those 2 together. And then I've got my contrast. This is all I've got left of my first 2 100 gram skeins of my contrast, but I've got 2 more up there that I'm going to wind, so that I can complete the lovely shawl. So the next time you see this, it'll be complete. It'll be finished, I should say. Complete, yeah, same thing. And I'm loving knitting this one as well. I love the look of this one. It is much more autumnal. I started up here with this brown, because this brown was the yarn that I used for some fingerless mitts for Bryony's boyfriend. So I thought that might be nice to start it off with that brown. And she loves that there's a bit of that yarn in it. So yeah, I'm very much enjoying it. It uses 4.5mm needles, but you know, adjust that for your gauge if needs be, obviously. But I really like the gauge that I get with fingering held double and 4.5mm. I know some people would probably use a bigger size for knitting a DK. I mean, traditionally, right, with a DK yarn, I would associate a 4mm with a DK yarn. That's the size of needle that I think really goes best, if you like. Depending on your gauge, obviously, but let's presume your gauge is a kind of standard middle of the road gauge. Then 4mm was always the you know, back in patterns when Mum used to knit jumpers back in the day, if she was using a DK, it was pretty much always 4mm for the body, and then the rib was like 3.5mm or something. But I like 4.5 for this because it's garter stitch and it just gives a bit more squish factor. It's just a little bit of a looser gauge and you get a bit more of a squish factor. But aren't those colours just lovely? So this shawl is big. It's the wingspan, so the long edge across the top is about 80 inches, and then I can't remember the down the spine measurement, but I mean, it's huge. I showed you before, I sort of wrapped this around me before, and it covers your entire body. It's really lovely. So I'm going to carry on working away on that. I worked out I only need to do 2 rows a day, and this will be done in plenty of time for Bryony's birthday. So first thing in the morning when I get up, I do those 2 rows, and then I know that it's done for the day, and that will be finished in plenty of time for the big day. So Dan Jones, what's on your needles?
An amazing story.
Oh.
Because this, in my amazing Back to the Future bag, which I absolutely love, you made me this.
I did make
for
that
my
for
garments, and it is
Yeah.
just tremendous. It's the best garment bag. But what's inside it? Well, I shall tell you. It's the Aaron Harper Gansey. Some places it's just the Harper Gansey.
Yes, on Ravelry,
Yes.
it's just Harper Gansey.
We link, though, any pattern that is available, any pattern that we knit, whether it be one of Kay's or someone else's, it's always linked in the show notes below. So the Harper Gansey knitted the body, and it's looking marvellous. And now I've moved on to the sleeves. And this is where we have a story of negativity and positivity.
Yes.
Because it began with me knitting the sleeve.
Yeah.
And I got to here, and I did the increases that you have to do
Yeah.
prior to doing the colour work, and they were wrong.
They were wrong in the pattern.
And as we're looking at the pattern, we sort of start to realise that there are quite a few things that are a little bit off. We then went and looked on Ravelry to see if there was any notes on there, see if anyone had said anything. What people had said was that there was a few errors.
Yeah.
But that, by sort of using their intuition, they'd got to the end.
Yeah.
But I'm always very upfront with people, so I thought I'm just going to email where
designer.
Kay bought it from.
Jameson's
Jameson Smith.
Jameson and Smith, yeah.
So I thought I'll just email them and I'll ask the question, because whilst we could guess what we probably needed to do,
Yeah.
our concern was if we guessed wrong, we then went to join the sleeve onto the body and the numbers were
And
off.
something was off.
For the yoke colour work, well, you can't really unpick that.
No.
So I emailed Jameson Smith first thing on the morning, and within 45 minutes I had a reply.
Yeah.
Isn't that brilliant?
Brilliant.
And Jameson Smith are big.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know this definitely, but I have a feeling the lady that replied to me was the designer.
Well, the designer's name is Sandra
Yes.
Manson or
That's
something
right.
like that. And she signed the email Sandra, so we can only presume it is her.
And I looked, and Sandra does work for Jameson Smith.
So we've got to think it must be.
Yes. Now, unfortunately, the information that Sandra gave me wasn't quite right.
No.
And if I did what she told me, I would have ended up with an odd number on the needles.
And it had to be an even number of stitches.
So I thought I'll email back,
Yeah.
which I did. And I then got a lovely reply from someone called Ella. Now, this is where worlds collide.
Yeah.
Because you may recall that the other passionate project of mine right now is the Roosty Tank Top by Ella Gordon.
Ella Gordon.
And I knew that Ella Gordon worked for Jameson Smith.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm just going to ask her.
Are you Ella Gordon?
So I did. So I emailed her back and I said, are you Ella Gordon who designed the Roosty Tank Top? She came back, she said, yes, I am. And that gave me the in I was looking for.
Dan was like, oh my word.
I opened up completely.
He did a little fangirl.
Yes, I did. I told her how amazing I thought her pattern was, how much I was enjoying knitting it. We shared a few backwards and forwards, actually, which was just lovely. Spoke a bit about the steeking, which is coming up. And Ella was just lovely.
Lovely.
And Ella also answered the question about the Harper Gansey.
She did.
So it's like... it's synergy.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. So I was just... It's so lovely, isn't it, when every cloud ends up with a silver lining. And I think, this is why it's always great to go and talk to people direct if you encounter an issue. Because the one thing that Sandra actually said she said no one had ever told us that mistake was there.
The pattern's been out for years. This pattern was actually the free pattern that went with Shetland Wool Week, I think in 2011 or something.
You're right. And no, I know why people won't have said, because experienced garment knitters would have looked at that like we were able to do and go, this is what I think we need to do.
We could have figured it out, you know, but
if you don't tell people,
that's
how do they
right.
know
Being responsible knitters and thinking that other people might want to knit this, we thought we've got to feed this back, because there was only about 7 projects on Ravelry, and although a few of those did say that there were errors, they didn't say what the errors were and how they corrected them. They just said they managed to work it out. It wasn't difficult. And that might be the case if you're an experienced knitter, but if you're not, then it might not be that easy, might it?
No.
So, the pattern, at the end of the day, it is a paid-for pattern now, and it should be correct.
Yeah.
Especially when it's numbers for a garment. I think you can really come a cropper if you don't get your numbers right. But this is looking great, With
the correct numbers
on my arm.
Superhero people might be thinking that you look a bit like...
Oh, who do I look like?
You look like... It's the Avengers. It's the final Avengers film there's like a gauntlet or something or other.
Is that what I look
the way
like?
you hold it up, it looks a bit like that. It's quite funny. Yeah, I don't know. Don't do superheroes like that, so I don't really know. But anyone who does do that, they'll know what I mean. But yes, got the right numbers.
Great,
cast it back on. Got knitting, and it's all
feels
going
lovely.
Swimmingly.
This is on my bare arm, obviously, and it feels really nice.
The perfect weather for jumpers.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
I should pop on this, I wish it was finished. I'd just pop it on and go for a little walk out there in the
part of me
27-degree heat. That would be marvellous.
Part of me wants to bungle my Alexander and go for a brisk walk in the woods.
Everybody'd look at you thinking you were crazy. But we do see people, because it's now September.
Yeah.
We do see people with coats on, even though it's boiling.
It does make me laugh when... And it makes me laugh. I think it's more of a British thing, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a global thing. People dress to the season, not to the actual weather.
People think, well, it's September, I'll need a coat.
But sometimes you'll see people in the middle of summer, when it's typically English summer, and it's cold, and maybe it's a bit wet, and they've got on shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
To be fair, that was us, wasn't it? When we went out for that walk the other day. Do you remember? We got to the park and we got absolutely soaked.
Oh, gosh, we did.
That's what this summer's been like.
Well, the weather didn't say any rain, so we went out in just T-shirts and,
It's like torrential.
And it just, literally, the heavens opened. And I said, what are we going to do?
Then you go check the weather and then, rain.
We didn't have an umbrella with us.
When it's actually happening.
I said, we're just going to have to get wet, aren't we?
So we did.
And so we got absolutely soaked, had to get completely changed when we got home.
So this is the Aran Harpaganzi, or the Harpaganzi, depending on where you look. It is... I really like the pattern. Now that I've got the numbers sorted...
I'm going to love it. And you will have seen the body already.
Yes.
Dan showed the shots of the body.
I'm really... yes, there's been an issue or two, but... It doesn't matter, does it, when you get a response that fast?
Yes.
So,
And it ended up being a really lovely interaction.
Yes.
That you were thrilled about.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. I'll be talking about it for years.
Don't ever be afraid, I would say, to message designers. I know that...
I think all I would say is be certain that there's a mistake.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Make sure that you really, really need to message the designer. Yeah, I know that some designers wouldn't automatically reply themselves. They have, pattern support people. But I would hope that you would get replies from them.
If you're certain,
quickly.
If you've encountered something that is obviously a mistake... we went through it to the farthest degree.
We spent ages looking at it, honestly, we really did.
I knitted it wrong. So
yes.
That's what showed us that it was wrong.
Yeah.
We then went through, we checked all the numbers. So when we were certain that there was a mistake...
it wasn't right.
That's the point where I think you should always reach out. And, brilliant interaction. So Aran Harpaganzi, part way up the sleeve.
Yeah.
And just plain knitting. So hopefully...
Get those done really quick. You normally knit sleeves really quick.
I do. I like sleeves. Funny that. No second sleeve syndrome
don't,
for me.
But you like sleeves? What's a sleeve?
It's this. That's a sleeve. What else is on? Ooh, confusing. Kay will explain to us now.
I will explain. So the next thing on my needles is a pair of socks. And this is a pair of socks for Dan. I started these socks recently. However, I did initially start a different pair. And I said on the last episode I was going to talk about this yarn a bit more in this episode because I knew that I'd started this new pair, which means that I have to talk to you about this pair that I'm not continuing with. So was that a ramble? Did you understand what I meant?
I'm not certain, but I'm sure everyone else is.
Okay, I started a pair of socks for Dan. I don't like the yarn. I'm not carrying on with those. I've started another pair that I do like the yarn.
Got it.
So I'm going to talk now about the ones that I'm not continuing with, and I'll tell you why.
Boom.
That all makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Lovely, lovely. So I started this pair of socks, and I haven't pulled them off the needles because I wanted to show you. And I wanted to tell you why I wasn't continuing with them. I started this pair of socks. You might recognise this yarn because it is a new yarn, and it's a new yarn from West Yorkshire Spinners. It's their signature 4-ply, and this particular colourway is a new one, and it's called Green Woodpecker. I absolutely love the colours. I saw it and I thought that just reminds me of Christmas. Just made me think of Christmas. So it's West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply Green Woodpecker. When I bought this yarn, I thought, I'm sure there's a reason that I don't immediately knit with this yarn. I'm sure that there was something in my head historically that made me think there's a reason why I don't generally knit with this particular yarn. But I couldn't remember. And I really loved the colours. And I still really love the colours. And I've left it on the needles because, you know, to decide whether I really, really want to rip it out or if I do just want to continue. My problem with this yarn, okay, and this, I'm going to preface this by saying this is my opinion, okay, and I know that this yarn I think is quite well loved. I see it on the internet a lot, you know, people knitting it up. So yeah, this is just my opinion. You know, I purchased this yarn. I actually bought about 3 skeins in different colours. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about that. Maybe I'll just donate it. I'll tell you what my issue is with this yarn, shall I? It's the actual yarn itself. And what I mean by that is, just by knitting this bit of rib, I've come across several times areas where the yarn gets so thin, it's like lace weight, and there's a thin area here. So it's going to be quite difficult to show you because, you know, these yarns are here and it's difficult to show you on screen. But maybe you can see. I'll hold it against, I don't know if you can tell, but this bit here looks nice and sort of normal. This bit here looks super thin. And this didn't just happen once, it happened a lot, and I've only knit the rib. And I knit this rib and I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm just not enjoying these really thin sections. And then I remembered that this is why I don't really knit with this yarn, because I remembered that I didn't really like that about this yarn. So they've obviously, and it's years since I've used this yarn, so I'm presuming nothing can have changed with it in that time. So I thought, right, I've got a few of the balls. I'm just going to go and have a look at those and see if I can tell if the issue is the same. This is Milk Bottle. I just wound off a bit just for the heels for this pair. But I went to look at this ball and I looked at the other ones that I'd got as well. And they did, you know, just from looking at the outside of the ball, to me, I could see areas where it was really thin. And, you know, that might not bother some people and you would just knit.
If you knit it and it makes a thin fabric, might that not wear through fast?
Well, you would think so. You would think so, that would be the case. And that was that was one of my concerns. My main thing is that I wasn't enjoying knitting with it because I kept hitting these really thin sections and it was stressing me out. I'm like, oh gosh, another really thin section. How long is it going to go on for this time, you know? And it wasn't just 1 or 2 stitches. It's quite a little section where the yarn was really thin. So I just thought, you know what? I don't have to. It's, you know, it's my knitting, isn't it? I don't have to continue with these if I don't want to. So I pulled out a different yarn and I've started the other yarn. But I think it's important, you know, we're always open and honest, and we always tell you when we love things. But conversely, I think it's important that we tell you if we've not had the best of experiences with something else. So it's a real shame, because I absolutely love the colours in this. You know, you can see you've got this stripe going on with reds and greens. It's so festive and looks so nice. And, you know, I'm really disappointed that the yarn, it's not consistent, is what I want to say. It's just not consistently the same thickness. So that to me must be something within the spinning and plying of the yarn. You know, something within the process of it is causing that. It kind of goes down to what I would think of more of like a lace weight thickness. So long and short is I'm not continuing with that yarn. So I thought, right, okay, what am I going to do about this? Because I do want to knit down another pair of socks. So I thought, right, I'm going to go into my vintage Opal stash and pick something and start a sock. So that's what I've done. And I say vintage Opal because I do also have a bit of a gripe with the Opal from now. I don't think that it's quite the same as Opal from years ago.
We've done
I've spoke about that before, so I'm not going to go on about that. But I do have a few sort of vintage Opal skeins in my stash. So I thought, right, I'm going to pull one out. So this one that I'm knitting with is lovely. It's Opal Graffiti. And this actually is from 2011. And this colourway is 5220. You can still get this yarn. I did do a little Google, and there were a few shops that still had some of it. And this is what it looks like in the cake. I have caked it up. It's really gorgeous, sort of autumnal shades. It's really lovely. And it feels like a proper nice sort of a tiny bit crunchy, fairly woolly wool Opal. It's really, really nice. And I'm loving the sock that I've cast on for Dan. So here is where I'm up to. Oh, it's knitting up so nice. And I knit a pair of socks. When did I knit these? Oh, 2017 I knit these other socks that I'm going to show you in a minute. I've already knit with this yarn in a different colour, so I've dug those out. But look how lovely this is knitting up. Isn't that nice? I'm just doing a sort of fairly shorty pair for him. So I've done the heel, flap and turn, and I'm just on the gusset decreases. I'm using double points, as you can see. But doesn't it knit up lovely? And it's like chalk and cheese, honestly, knitting this vintage Opal and then knitting the West Yorkshire Spinners. It really is, for me, like chalk and cheese. And I'm loving this, and it feels, you know, bouncy and woolly and just lovely. So what I did, because I didn't want to break up the way that it's knitting up here, it's almost like a self-striping, isn't it? I pulled from the middle of the ball just for doing the heel flap and the turn, and then picked the main colour, the main end, you know what I mean, back up when I'd picked up the gusset. And I think that's worked out really well. So I'm really enjoying these. I always cast on 72 stitches for Dan's socks, and I'm using Adi Calibri double points, 2.5mm. And it's just given me such a lovely gauge. It's quite nice and sort of fairly dense. It's not super, I know that a lot of people like knitting their socks to like a super dense gauge, because I know it makes them more hard wearing, but I do like a little bit of give in hand knitted socks. So this gives me a perfect gauge. It's about 8.5 stitches to the inch I get. But I did knit a pair of socks out of this same yarn in a different colourway. So what's 26 years ago? And here they are. You might remember them. So these I knit in a sort of, I finished them in October, so I must have had a Halloween-y sort of theme going on. And the orange is also Opal. These have been worn quite a few times and been through the washer a few times, but I haven't worn them very much recently. As always with socks, you tend to, like, your more recent ones get priority, don't they? And ones you knit a while ago get stuffed to the bottom of your sock drawer. So I pulled these out, so I'll probably wear these now. I'll see if Bryony wants to wear them maybe. But isn't this colourway just lovely? the way it knits up like that in stripes. I think it's just so lovely. You don't often see opals like this, do you, these days? I think it's really, really nice. So I'm absolutely loving this pair of socks. Just a joy. It's just a plain vanilla sock, which is I haven't knit a plain sock for such a long time that it feels like, I don't know, like I'm on holiday or something, knitting just a plain vanilla sock. It's really lovely. So I'm really, really enjoying that.
Look at my Quantock hat.
Ah.
Or you could call it the Black Hills of Dakota hat.
Oh, you could.
This is the hat that I thought of and Kay designed when I wanted to do something with the Feederbrook Farms amazing yarn, which we've spoken about loads, but it is just superb. It's like handspun, but I'm sure it's done on a machine.
I think so. I think it's like the other one that's dead expensive that I can never remember the name of. You know the one, don't you?
Oh yeah, even I think I know. Why do I think Jared Flood's got something to do with it?
Oh, has he? I don't know. No, he's got his own yarn range. It's not that.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, anyway. But this is the amazing hat, and don't the colours look great? And the reason why it's called the Quantock hat is because these are the Quantock Hills in Somerset, and there's a storm coming in. Maybe, so these are the clouds at the top here, and it maybe sunset.
It looks cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think it's showing off the yarn just amazing.
Yeah.
It's tremendous to work with. It's so unbelievably lovely.
You're enjoying it?
Yeah. I mean, it really is.
Yarns are so
gorgeous, gorgeous yarn.
Look at those.
The pattern, you know, it really works. And, you know, that wave, I think, is just tremendous. And I couldn't really want for any more from a hat pattern because it is... There's a little bit of interest. The yarn's interesting. There was a bit of colour work to do. There was a few longer rows, so you had to carry your floats a bit. That has affected my gauge slightly, so it's got a bit wider, but I think it'll go on my mum's head.
Well, I'm just going to try it on when it's finished.
And the reason why it's called the Quantock hat is because my mum's from Somerset.
Yes, and she lives really close to the Quantock Hills.
Yes, she goes walking in them regularly.
Yeah.
So really, really tremendous, and, you know, really enjoying it. And I'm going to knit another one of these hats, I think, with the other colours when I've done this one. So I've got two other colours, but it's barely used any of the yarn anyway, so there'll be, you know, space to do some other stuff too. So that's all really fun.
It's really pretty. I don't know if they've come out more like mountains than waves.
That's why I call them the Quantock Hills.
Yeah, you wanted waves. I'm not sure they're curvy enough to be waves.
I'm quite happy for them to be mountains.
Yeah, so, you know.
I wasn't thinking the sea. I was just thinking up and downs.
Yeah, I know you weren't. So
we've not sort of lost any of the original design concept.
It's it's really pretty. So we'll see what it's like when it's blocked. We'll show you probably next time.
Maybe. Or maybe the time after. What else is on your needles?
So, it's another pair of socks, and this is a pair of socks. I'm sitting up because I'm so excited because we're in September now, and September is self-striping fluffed that up. So September is self-striping September. So our knit along is underway. So that for the month of September, we are knitting anything you like in self-striping yarn. So you can come and join us. It's for everyone. There's a thread open on Ravelry if you use Ravelry, if you want to go over and have a look. That's very, very active. There's loads of chatter in there. Everybody talking about what they're knitting, showing photos. It's really, really fun. So, of course, I had to cast on some
And this is open to the world.
It's open to everyone.
Come and join in.
So I had to cast on a pair of self-striping, didn't I? I went into my stash and I said to Bryony, right, choose one of these, and I laid them all out and we narrowed it down, and she chose a skein from Freckled Whimsy, and the colourway is called Spooky Kitty Remix. And I'm knitting some socks for her, and they're looking lovely. Now, the yarn comes with a mini. So the yarn looks like this. I've actually got it in two hand wound balls here. I had a bit of a problem winding it. So I ended up having to cut it, and then I've hand wound it, but that's fine, into 2 balls. And it did come with this green that matches perfectly, obviously, the green in there. Once I'd started knitting them and I showed them to Bryony, she's like, where's the purple? I said, there isn't any purple in this. She's like, well, it's got to have purple. It's Halloween. I said, well, there's no rules that say you've got to have purple when it's Halloween. But in her head, it did have to have purple. I said, right, okay. I'll go into my stash, I'll find a purple mini, and I'll do some purple heels and toes for you. So that's what I've done. So I'm actually pairing it with this purple, which I thought was quite Halloween-y. And I think this is a Pixie Yarns mini. And I've started a pair of socks. And I'm knitting my fairground pattern. Oh, look how amazing this yarn looks with the pattern. I think it's so cool. It's difficult to show, isn't it, when it's just slightly done. There we go. How cool does that look? And someone said, when I posted a picture of this, that the black stripes look like bats in flight. Isn't that just amazing? They absolutely do. So when I said that to Bryony, she's like, oh, they've got to be my Batman socks. So I've put in a butterfly heel. It's one of my heels. It's the heel that I put into my designs, and it's actually in 3 of my patterns. It's in the lattice-topped socks, it's in the rumple socks, and it's also in the fairground socks. I put it in there as an alternative heel.
And I think you developed it initially in the Knitty U, the very first Knitty U that you did.
No.
Oh, right.
This heel I first used in my sock bunting.
Right, and then it went into the Knitty U.
Yeah.
Right, so sock bunting is platinum pattern.
The mini sock bunting is the platinum pattern, so I used it
Perfect for Christmas.
Yeah, I used it in that, and then I loved it so much that there's a sock pattern that's called the reading socks. Funnily, oh my goodness, you could totally knit yourself a pair of reading socks and your shawl. Get yourself a book. You're set, aren't you? But yeah, I put that heel into the reading socks as well, which were a really gorgeous pair of socks where it's the yarn is held double with like a fluffy mohair or suri alpaca or whatever. Absolutely snuggly gorgeous socks. And I used it in that. And then I got so many questions from our patrons saying, oh, could you do this for a fingering weight sock? I said, well, there's no reason why not. So I then went on to do the lattice top socks, and it uses that heel, and then I put it in as an alternative heel in both the rumple socks and the fairground socks. And it's not a short row heel, it's a mock short row heel. It uses decreases and then increases, and I really love knitting it. It's quick and it's neat, and it actually fits Bryony really well. I know that this type of heel doesn't always fit people in the best way, which is why I've put it in as an alternative into those 2 other patterns. But yeah, I'm knitting these self-striping socks and I'm just absolutely loving them. The yarn's lovely. I've knit with Carrie's yarn a few times now, and I've actually just done a second part review of her yarn, and it's just lovely. And I do really like these colours. These are not colours I'd normally go for, but I think with this pattern, with this design, it just looks amazing. I think it does look Halloween-y. And I just love them. And I'm using double points again because I'm still in the double point zone. Well,
you're going to remain in the double point zone until Sockoween.
Till Sockoween, probably.
Because it's 2 big sort of socky months.
It is.
Especially with these socks.
I know. So if I don't finish these in September, then I've got October, haven't I, to finish them. So when we go into Sockoween. So that's really fun.
And the reason why Kay's doing lots of double points is because she's doing a brand new double point tutorial series.
Yes, in how to knit a pair of socks using double points. So we're just about to start filming that actually. So that'll be ready for our patrons when we start Sockoween. So yeah, really loving them, and I'll probably I really want to knit on these, so I'll probably finish this first one quite quickly and then we'll just see. I'm not going to rush to finish it in September, but they'll definitely be done by the end of October.
Now, the other thing that you really should mention, because it's the first time you've ever knitted a collection that matches.
Yes.
And I've got some wonderful pictures.
Yes.
So this is the Faraway collection.
Yes.
Gorgeous mitts, amazing hat, and now topped off Well, no, it's not topped off. The hat tops you off. The filling in the middle is the gorgeous cowl.
The lovely cowl. That is the what's-his-name cowl, Mr. What's-his-name cowl.
And this is that completes the Platinum Collection for 2023.
It
Spoke
does.
about it last time, I think, didn't you?
Yes, I did speak about it last time. But yeah, it's just nice to see all 3 designs together, isn't it? I think they all look absolutely lovely. Can't wait to wear them when this hideous weather has passed.
And that came out, the Faraway Collection was completed on the 1st of September, and that's available to download free to Gold and Platinum patrons.
Yes.
And it's very exciting, actually. I just think that, and also as well, the response from the patrons has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
People have really loved the whole sort of collection thing.
Yes.
And has it set you thinking about?
Well, I am going to be doing something next year where it's a similar sort of thing. And I'm going to talk about it next time because I'm going to show you the project that inspired me to think, oh, I could do 3 designs based around this theme. And the theme is like so fun.
The Faraway Collection, Kay's first collection, and a new potential collection is now in the
making for next year.
Creative oven.
Yes, and I think it's going to be incredibly well received.
Oh, well, that's cool.
So yeah, I'll talk about it next time. Super excited.
Before all that, though, of course, and it's highly stressful at the moment as the final sort of cogs turn in the creation of this year's Bakery Bears Advent Calendar.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. There's been a lot going on with regards to this design. A lot going on. So, and I will talk about that once we, get into the Advent season. I will talk about, because in the first video I sort of talk about the design and I'll tell you how it came about, and I will talk about it in full then as to the sort of creative process that is currently going on for that design. But by then, everything will be done and beautiful and ready.
It's very exciting, actually, because, from my point of view, I feel very lucky because I get to sort of witness all of this happening, and you can see it going through stages, and then eventually it gets to this point and it's like, yes, and you can see it then you've taken something normal and added a twist to it slightly.
Yeah,
literally.
I thought I'd done the design, but apparently I hadn't.
No one told her otherwise.
It's just me. I just wasn't. Something wasn't sitting right with me, so I basically completely redesigned it.
Well, that process now is through.
It's well underway, and
I know now. Just I can tell you looking at it.
Yeah,
now it's like ping.
I'm much more settled in my mind. I had to change all of the yarns I was using and colours and everything. The whole thing got changed. But this is part of the process, and sometimes things go really quickly, and sometimes they don't, and it can be tough sometimes. When that happens, because I'd got it in my head that I'd got it sorted, and I was really excited, and plenty of time, and then I'm like, no, I haven't.
Hey-ho.
Back to the drawing board. But
it's always an exciting process, the design process, and Kay actually produces a series called Kay's Design Diary that you can go and watch, and you can look back at lots of different sort of projects and how they've come about, which is really, it's a really cool thing from my point of view to film, and I know people really love watching it.
Yeah.
But that's enough design talk. We want to see some more of the My Favourite Blanket, don't we? And yes, it is absolutely fair to say the sun may be blazing, but also the leaves are turning.
They are.
They are properly turning. So it's a bit weird.
The trees know best, don't they?
It's a bit weird that we appear to be having the warmest part of our summer right at the point where autumn is beginning to arrive. Yeah. But autumn is beginning to arrive. And so that makes me very excited to head out into the woods to find out what is going to be the inspiration for today's colourway in My Favourite Blanket.
I adore creating and knitting blankets, so I decided to design a new one just for us. In this series, I'm going to show you how to make your own. From the yarn to the stitches. Join me as we knit through the seasons to create my favourite blanket. Everybody to my favourite blanket, and welcome back to our little woodland here, which is still looking really green, but there are leaves on the ground now and there's a definite feel of autumn in the air, especially first thing in the morning, and it's much darker in the morning and it's much darker at night time as well. It's darker earlier, so that's all really exciting. So I am here today in our little wooded area to tell you about the next flower. So this is the flower for October for my favourite blanket, and actually it kind of does start to get more difficult as you run towards the end of the year, because inevitably a lot of plants do flower in the warmer weather, but there is one plant that I actually came across. This plant, I think I was watching A Gardener's World ages ago. I was watching something and they mentioned this plant and they showed it, and I thought, oh, that's really lovely, and it sort of stuck in my mind, and I just remembered when I was thinking of what would be good for later on in the season. And the plant is called a Persicaria. So it's quite a hardy perennial. It has beautiful, brightly coloured flower spikes that are, the colours range actually from, there are some softer colours, there are some more sort of pale pinks and apricot-y sort of colours, but primarily it's like deep reds and sort of like purpley reds. Really, really pretty plant. Now its common name is knotweed. Don't panic, it has no relation at all to, or it's not related, I should say, it's not related at all to the infamous Japanese knotweed, which is, I've never had that, thankfully, in any of the gardens I've been in, but it is an absolutely awful plant if you happen to get it in your garden, and really difficult to get rid of. But Persicaria has nothing to do with the Japanese knotweed. Its common name is just knotweed, and it isn't invasive at all. It's just a really lovely perennial. The varieties in particular that I've kind of honed in on and are the ones that have inspired today's dyeing session. There's three actually. There's two that have inspired the speckled colourway. So the first one is called Firetail, and that one is, as the name suggests, it's a really gorgeous bright red. And then the other one is Blackfield, and that one is a much sort of deeper, more purplish red. So that's the two colours that will be coming through in the speckles. And then for our tonal, sort of slightly variegated skein, I've gone for one that focuses really on the foliage, and it's called Painter's Palette. And that has a variegated foliage. It's sort of different shades of green, and there's also a little flash of that kind of red colour in there as well. So that's the ones that I'm going to be focusing on in terms of the dyeing, but there are loads and loads of different varieties, and it's a really useful hardy perennial. So that's what we're going to be dyeing up today. Beautiful Persicaria. First thing we need to do is get out of this lovely woodland and into the kitchen and get dyeing that fantastic yarn. Okay, so here we go with our Persicaria inspired yarn. So what we're going to need to dye it up, we will of course need our yarn. This is exactly the same as I've been using the whole way through this series. So in my bowl here, soaking, I've got 4 skeins. I'll say 4 skeins, but they're 50 grams each. So 4 times 50 grams of fingering weight yarn, and that's been soaking in some warm water and a scoop, sort of tablespoon of citric acid for a good half hour or so. The citric acid is the mordant. So the mordant is the substance that makes the dye permanently stick to the yarn. So we do need a mordant. A lot of dyers use vinegar. I don't think so much these days actually. I know that people like Madeline Tosh always used to use vinegar because their yarn always used to smell vinegary when you got it. I haven't had any Madeline Tosh in years, so I don't know if that's still the case. But yeah, you need that acid because they are acid dyes that we're using. So we've got 4 lovely 50 gram skeins in here. Each of my 50 gram skeins is 200 meters, and it's an 85-15. So 85 superwash merino, 15 nylon. We've got, of course, I've mentioned the citric acid, so we've got that here to add in when we do the dyeing. My big spoon, you know, I've got to have my big spoon. And we've got paintbrushes today because we're going to be doing speckling, and then I'm also going to be using my measuring spoon as well, which is an 1/8 of a teaspoon measure. I've got my 2 dyeing pans. These are just standard casserole pans, stainless steel, that I've used for years for dyeing yarn, but I only ever use all of the equipment for dyeing. So I always say that because I always think it's worth saying, because it might be the first time you're watching, that anything you use to dye yarn, you then only use those items to dye yarn, because the acid dyes are toxic, the dye powders are toxic. So I've got 2 stainless steel pans. We've then got my mask, of course. I've got something to protect my work surfaces because I'm just here in the kitchen. So I've got some leftover oilcloth and some old tea towels. Gloves, I've got a thicker pair, and I will get a thinner pair as well because I don't like wearing the thicker pair all the time. I've got my dye book with my recipe, and then of course the dyes. This time we've got 6, and it's actually, I'm using all 3 brands that I use for this one. But as I've done previously, when I tell you what the colour is I'm going to be using, I'll describe that colour, so that if you can't get the actual brand I'm using, you should be able to find a substitute that's more local to you. Now, because this flower is, it varies really. You do get some that are paler coloured, but a lot of them are those kind of rich reds and deep purples. So it's that lovely autumnal richness that we're getting into now. So for the sort of flower element, we've got 3 colours. So we've got a landscape dye, and it's wild raspberry. This one is like a deep purplish, pinkish. It is like sort of crushed, imagine crushed raspberries. I think this actually is a touch more purple than crushed raspberries actually would be. We've then got another landscape, and that's heath. It's a lovely kind of like dusky pink. Really, really pretty, edging towards like a salmony pink, and that's how we're going to be using it today. When you speckle it, it does come out looking like a salmon pink. And then we've got a jacquard, and that's scarlet, which is as it sounds, it's that bright scarlet red. And then we have got, for our other skein that we're going to be doing, we've got another landscape, and it's alfalfa. It's just a lovely, not quite mossy, but not quite bright. It's like an in-between green, really pretty. We've then got another green, which is Dharma, and that's sour apple. I love this green. It's like that Granny Smith green. So that's lovely. And then the final colour is another landscape dyes, and that's bronze. So there we go. That is everything we're going to need. Our yarn has already soaked, so it's time now to get over to the stove and dye up the first yarn. Okay, so I've got a little bit of water heating up here, but we're going to do the speckled one first. So as per usual, I've only got a little bit of water in my pot. There's only maybe about an inch, And I've got another scoop, a tablespoon or so of citric acid in there, and that's just heating up. I'll turn it down now because I can see it is starting to steam. So I'm going to put 2 of my 50 gram skeins into the pot. So just give them a squidge out because we don't really want to introduce much more water into there. Give them a little shake. And we're going to drop them in and then just sort of rearrange them to give as much surface area as possible. This water is hot, but it's not unmanageable with just these thin gloves on. But you know, just be careful because the water will be hot. So get thicker gloves if you want to. You can see that there's hardly any water above the yarn, and that's just what we want for speckling. I'm just going to crank up my heat a little bit because once you put the yarn in, it'll bring the temperature down, so you just need to bring that back up a little bit. So the first colour that's going to go in is the scarlet, and I really want that purplish tone to come through, so I'm going to put the scarlet on first to give us that red base, and then I'm going to put the raspberry on top of it. So in with the scarlet. Oh, now, as always with red dye, I do get a bit nervous because it's so powerful and so strong. So go easy, okay? So let's scoop some up. Down we go, nice and close to the yarn, and just put a bit on like that. I'm not going to put too much because it is really strong in terms of like depth of colour, and whilst I want some red, I want it to be a very purplish red. So just choose some areas. You know, you might choose an area where you just put a little bit. This is what will give it lots of variation when we're knitting it up. Try not to be too regular, and then, you know, give it a second and see what it looks like, and then you might want to go in and add a little bit more. And you can see, I'm going to turn the heat off actually now, because you can see where the water is moving more. Can you see how this is sort of like spread out more than these ones here? Because these ones are not having that bubbling sort of heat coming up and dispersing the dye. So I've turned the heat off for a second, just while we get these speckles in. A bit more there, and then I'm going to leave it at that, I think, because I don't want to overdo the red. And now moving straight to the wild raspberry. Now again, this one is a really powerful colour. If you can see into the pot there, it is a really strong colour. But I kind of want that with this. I didn't want too much red, but I do want the raspberry to shine through the red. Now as it goes on, you might not notice too much of a difference between the two colours, but there is a definite difference. But it's difficult on camera whilst you doing it, I think, to show the difference in the colours. But it's definitely more purpley. Again, I'm going quite delicate because they will inevitably give an overall pinkish hue to the yarn, and that's fine, but I do want these strong pops of colour to really shine through that. So you can see I'm going on top of that red, but also just giving it its own little bit of bare yarn. Just a bit more over here, I think. Okay, I think I'm going to go with that. So I'm just going to pop my heat back on now, and now I'm going to go in with the heath. And this one, I mean, it looks, if you look in the tub, it looks very pale compared to those ones we've just put on. And it will produce a sort of salmon-y colour when we speckle it. So I'm going to go in these little areas where there isn't any. Just pop some on. When you first put it on, it does look pink, but then as the colour develops, it does develop into more of a salmon-y colour. And just find those areas where we just want to give a bit of variety to the colour. And don't neglect the top of your skeins here that are over the cable ties. I always sort of put a little bit on there too. There we go. so that's our first layer of colour, and I mean I can see with the naked eye the differences in the shades. I'm not sure if you'll be able to at this stage, but you can see this is the heath here, and it is a very different shade to what's going on here. It's much more salmony pink. So I want that to set now, so that's just blipping away just gently, and I'm going to put on my makeshift lid. So I've just got a piece of foil. If you've got an actual lid, pop your lid on. But foil works perfectly well if you haven't. And I'm just going to let that set for 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most it will take. I just want to set those really strong colours as much as I possibly can. Inevitably, because of the way we're dyeing, because there's not a lot of water in there, some of the dye will just sit on the surface of the yarn and will then, when we move it around, it will then blend into the rest of the yarn. That's absolutely fine. All we're trying to do is get those little high points of colour. So I'm going to give that a few minutes to set. Okay, so that's had no more than 10 minutes, I would say. And just gently blipping away just to set. And the way we tell if we've got a good set is just get your big spoon and just find an area of dye and just press down. And can you see how that's not moving? And then you can be brave enough to go over to a slightly more saturated bit, and again, that's pretty good. You know, we're not getting much movement there of dye. So I think we're safe there. So I'm going to lift my skeins, and as I do that, you will see, can you see how we've got very little going on here, all of the action down here. Oh, it looks lovely, doesn't it? So I'm going to just shuffle this a little bit on the skein to add that randomness, and also I'm going to sort of flip it to make sure that we get a good amount of dye on both sides. I think that one actually has flipped itself looking at that. So now when we put it back in, try and see which side, there we go, it's that side, has got the least amount of dye. And as you move it into the water, move the side that's got the dye sort of to face down underneath the water, because we don't want that really to get any more dye if we can help it. We want to expose all of this white area that doesn't have any currently. There will be little areas where, you know, you can see bits and pieces, that's absolutely fine. But we just want to get as much white undyed yarn on our surface there. Okay, that looks good. So we're just going to repeat that process now on this side of the yarn. If your water starts to sort of, you know, bubble too much, just turn your heat off while you're speckling. And mine at the moment, there's a tiny bit of movement, not too much. So let's get in and do this. So again, I'm going to start with the scarlet and find these areas that have got nothing at all. So a little bit there. This is a good patch look. This is going to be such a pretty one, I feel. And then we've not been over here, have we? What can happen, you might find that your paintbrushes get sort of damp from the steam. So when that happens, just be a bit careful, because you can end up with like a clump of dye on there. So if you need to, you know, get a clean paintbrush. That's okay. So I'm just going to turn my heat off now for a second while we get the raspberry in. Okay. So over those same areas, on top and around. So going on top will really add to the intenseness of colour that we get. It'll give us different shades, and then going just by itself we'll get that pure raspberry colour. Because it's nice to have those really dark pops of colour. And now the heath. So with this one I tend to sort of scoop some up onto my brush like that, because it's not as intense of a colour. I'm not quite as scared of it. And I think because, you know, reds are not a colour, I really love reds, but I am always drawn to sort of more blues and greens. So just look for those little areas and give it a little sprinkling of the heath. I think that looks good actually. So now we get to just pop that heat back on. You might think, oh, why is she turning the heat on and off like that all the time? It's a bit annoying. It's only because two reasons. I don't really like to boil yarn for too long, because I just think the more you're boiling it, there's a likelihood you're going to damage those fibres. And the other reason is that when you're speckling, if you've got bubbles coming up through your yarn, it can then do that on the surface, and your dye will distribute in it as well. So that's really the main reason when I'm speckling. But that's now just a gentle sort of blipping away. So I'm going to give it just sort of 5 minutes on the stove. Just let it gently cook away for 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to pop it outside to cool down. Right, here we go then with our coordinating skein. So this one is going to be slightly variegated, but then also over dyed, because what we're going to do is, although I want to create initially a sort of slightly variegated green colour, because this is going to reflect the foliage of the plant, which in a lot of the varieties is quite a bright green, but there is a variety that's a variegated leaf. And I'm also going to use a bit of artistic license. Sorry, I can see a bit of floaty something there. I just needed to grab it. I'm also going to use a bit of artistic license because we are now moving into autumn, and I really wanted to get a bit of that autumn feel into it, hence the sort of over dyeing. So we're going to start off and we're going to put some of our sour apple directly into the pot. So the water here heating up nicely now. I've got some steam coming off. I've got citric acid in here as well, another sort of scoop in here, and it's about half full. I'm going to put only about a quarter of this 1/8 of a teaspoon into the pot. Oh, I love watching it. Isn't it pretty? Because also this coordinating skein, I just want it to be a softish undertone, as all of them have been through this. I don't ever want really that coordinating skein to completely take over from the speckles. Give it a nice stir. Lovely. And now we can get our yarn in, and what we're going to do, we only want this colour on the sort of bottom, about this much of the skein, because that's how we're going to create a variegation. So I'm going to drop it in slowly, and then I'm going to sort of halt when about this much is in the water, and then if you get your big spoon and just swish around, the dye disappears in no time at all. So let's grab our remaining 2 skeins, squidge, give it a little shake, and then drop it in quite slowly. And as you're dropping it in, just grab your spoon, and you can see it's a gentle colour, but the longer we leave it in there, it'll absorb more of that colour. So just sort of swish around the bottom bit of the skein like this, and then as it's almost gone, that colour. So now I am going to drop in the rest of the skein, just so that it gets a merest hint of that green. But can you see how we've got that quite, in comparison, it looks like quite a bright green to this. In reality, it's not really that bright. And just swish it around like this for a minute, and the dye will have gone, because very little dye. And now I'm going to turn my heat down. I can now take the skein out. Can you see how, oh, it looks lovely, doesn't it? If you were to just leave it like this and twist it up into a skein, it looks so pretty. But if you were to knit it like this, say you knit a pair of socks, I would say you're going to get some pooling. So just pick it out and just squidge it a little bit. Make sure you've got some heat-proof gloves on. And just pop it back in our bowl, which is now empty. And now we're going to add some alfalfa into the pot. So the alfalfa is a completely different green. It's sort of a little bit mossy. It's quite a subdued green. But I'm going to put in this case, I'm going to put in a full 1/8. because this isn't as strong of a colour. Can you see it going in there? It's much mossier, isn't it? Oh, isn't it pretty? Give it a stir. And that's not a very strong colour at all. We may add a bit more, but let's just start with that. Now what we're going to do is go over to our yarn, and we're going to move it on the skein down to about here. No, a bit more, hang on. There we go. We want it so that you've basically flipped the ends. Can you see how this green bit is here? I've offset it a little bit. I've deliberately not put this right up here because I wanted to offset it a bit to just add to the variegation. So you can see now how we've got this sour apple here. Not a lot going on down here at all, and this is the end that we're going to now pop in. Now with this one, I'm going to do sort of the same thing, but I'm going to drop it in a little bit quicker because I do want to get some of this more mossy green over the rest of the skein. And then we'll see how pale of a green that is and whether we think it needs a little bit more colour. So that will have dissipated in seconds. I am going to add a little bit more colour. I know this might seem a bit of a faff, but we can't take it away. But you can see the difference between this sort of gentle, more sagey green compared to this quite vivid bright here. So I am going to add a bit more because I do want it a bit more green than that. So I'm probably going to go with almost another 1/8, I think. So I tend to just keep this lifted up like this, and I know this might be a bit painful on your arms, but it literally just takes a second to stir that through, and then we're going to drop it back in. So drop it back in, swishing around like that. And then we'll have another look at that. So again, just keep swishing and it just disappears quickly. And by doing this as well, you're getting the dye to all of the parts of the yarn that we want to. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's better. So you can see now down here we've got a nice shade of green going on, but it is a very different green to this vivid appley green up here. So this is perfect. And if you want to, you could leave it like this. If you want to have a green to coordinate with it, you might prefer to leave it at this stage and call it done. I want to make it look a bit more autumnal. So I'm going to over dye it with a bit of bronze. So I'm going to take this out of the pot again, give it a squish, and just drop it back in our bowl. So now we're going to pop in some bronze. So I'm going to start off with not too much, maybe again about 1/4. Drop that in. You can see what a lovely autumnal shade this is. Yeah, I'm going to add some more. That's not enough. So I'm going to add a little bit more. I want some of that green to shine through, but I'm just dulling it down. That's effectively what I'm doing. So just a little bit more. I'm just giving it that edge of autumn. That's better. So I'm going to grab my yarn, leave it as it was in the skein before. I'm going to bring it over. I'm going to drop it in fairly rapidly. In it goes, swish it around a little bit, not too much. Okay, and then let's just leave that for a second and we'll see what that looks like. We can still see lots of green, but you know, we might have done enough to just dull down that green, but we might want to add a bit more. I'm just swishing it around just to dissipate that dye. Oh, and that's lovely now. It's like a sort of, it's hard to describe, a golden green, if there's such a thing. But we can still see that pop of the bright green that the leaf originally was. So now I'm just going to let that come up to simmering point. till we get in, make sure that the water is, not quite boiling. I never take temperatures. I never have taken temperatures because I just judge it by what the water's telling me. And when I see bubbles start to come up and there's a bit of movement, I know that it's hot enough. So I'm just going to let that come up now to the simmer and then turn it off and pop it outside with the other one to cool down. Okay, so that is our yarn all dyed up and it's cooling outside. So come back in part 2 when we're going to get the yarn rinsed, we'll get it all dry and fluffy and lovely and ready to start the knitting. Very, very exciting. So I will see you back soon.
What a wonderful start to the episode. I love the name of that flower.
Persicaria.
That sounds Roman to me, and they normally are
kind
Latin
of does,
names,
doesn't
aren't
it?
they?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's confusing, I think, with plants. You get...
I think the common name is knotweed. Is this right for this one? I think it is.
Right.
But it's not to be confused with Japanese knotweed, because that is the one that's horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just invades everything. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful flower and perfect for that sort of hit of colour at this time of year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Been such a wonderful series to film this going through the seasons. And I say that now because there's only 2 episodes left.
Only 2 left.
After today.
Only 2 left. And, the last 2 flowers are, in particular, I mean, the November one is beautiful and just perfect. And probably... once you get into November, it's tricky really to find a plant that flowers. But I did find one, and it is a very popular flower. But then December is the one that I can't wait for because it's just so iconically festive and perfect.
Going out.
I just can't wait.
On a high.
Going out on a definite high. Yes.
And 2 episodes of My Favourite Blanket and also 2 episodes of Rise and Fall of the Monastery.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect time probably to say thank you to the people who make it all possible, because we have a very small crew of Bakery Bear patrons.
Yeah.
And the people I'm talking to are the crew of people who have been with us since the beginning.
Yeah.
And Kay and I have been talking, and I'm going to liaise, I think, slightly with Patreon, because I want to try and find a way of thanking these people.
Yeah.
Maybe doing something special for the people who've been with us consistently since the start.
And, we so appreciate that support.
Because without that support...
No, we absolutely wouldn't be here. And, the vast majority of people who watch us on YouTube are not patrons. And, so if it wasn't for those... like Dan said, the core people, the core patrons, then we wouldn't be here for anybody to watch.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you so much. We know exactly who you are.
We do. We know you all really well.
Yes.
You know that we know you really well, and it's just so lovely.
So we just wanted to say thank you so much, and absolutely going to try and find a way of doing something special for you in 2024. And if you are watching and you would like to become a patron, please do come and join us, because there's so many wonderful things to enjoy. Yes, being a patron empowers and keeps the video show on air, but as being a patron, you get lots of additional benefits, like Knitability, and there's a new issue of Knitability that's just come out.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in Endy Bits, but also as well for the higher levels of patronage, Gold and Platinum, for example, you get access to, we mentioned Faraway Collection earlier on. If you're a Platinum patron, there's something like 21 Platinum patterns now that you get immediate access to. Mm-hmm. I mean, and things like Scrooge's stocking, the sock bunting, the Blizzard socks. Yeah. The list goes on and on.
It does.
It's marvellous. Now, though, it's time for Kay to say...
Dan Jones.
Yes.
What's off your needles?
Can you believe it? I actually finished this a little while ago, but Kay has been such a machine producing so many amazing projects. There simply wasn't space.
And I don't have anything this time, so we get to show you this.
It is the wind sheaf.
Yeah.
It's the hat by Stephen West, all finished by me. The first time I knitted this, I messed it up. But my mum told me she still enjoyed wearing it. But I now wonder if that was fibs, because when I mentioned to her that I was knitting her a new hat, she got excited about a different hat, not this hat. She couldn't recall this hat at all.
Oh, gosh.
So I wonder if she wore it once or twice and thought, no, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And then lost it in the woods.
Maybe.
Which she did actually. Oh, no, it was in a pocket.
She thought she'd lost... Oh, interestingly, she thought she'd lost a hat I made her, which was in the blue tick colourway from West Yorkshire Spinners, interestingly. I mean, that was a hat, so that's different, really, to using it for socks. And she loves it, and she found it in the pocket of a coat.
After about a year.
Yeah, after about a year. She's like, what's that in my pocket?
She thought it had dropped out, I think, in the woods.
Yeah.
I didn't really enjoy knitting this.
No.
And I can totally see why I got it wrong before, because I really feel like I had to have my wits about me. The issue I found was there were points in the pattern which I felt were complicated for the sake of being complicated. And I also absolutely despised the decreases. So I did 2 rounds of the decreases, and I said to Kay, I don't think I can do this. And Kay said, oh, just change it to this.
Yeah.
I won't say what, because it's obviously paid for pattern. But we changed the decreases. We made it something much more enjoyable for me to do, which enabled me to finish the hat, and it's done. The problem is it's a bit small.
It's a bit small. I think your gauge, I measured your gauge, and it is smaller than the gauge in the pattern states. I think it's for a DK, the pattern, and this is a DK, but the DKs vary, don't they? I seem to think this yarn is Sirdar jewel spun.
Yeah, it is.
That's what it was.
It is. It's lovely.
It is really nice.
Not a lot of giving it.
No, not a lot of giving it. And the thing with this pattern, because it's got this twisted section that skews off, it does make the rib do a funny shape thing.
It
as
pulls.
well. It pulls to that side. But yeah, I mean, it has come out a bit small, but it may still fit Nanna Wendy because she does have a small head. So we're going to send it to her anyway.
Well, I say she's coming to visit us quite soon.
Oh, she is. Yes, we'll just say they are coming to visit.
Then she can try both on.
She can try it on,
both,
and she'll say, "What the dickens is this? It doesn't fit." Yeah, but the colours look lovely, don't they?
It's great.
Maybe it will fit.
You know, I can't criticise the colours. It wasn't a pleasant yarn to work with, because it was so stiff.
It's a single ply, and single plies don't have any give, do they? Because it's the plying, I think, that gives it bounce.
Yeah, it just made it, from a working point of view for me, doing things like knit 3 togethers on a yarn that's not giving is a challenge. So we needed to, adopt other approaches. Similarly, on the ribbing, going up and, starting on one needle size, going up to another needle size, it was really tough on the hands.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't want to knit with that yarn again.
You can see on that side there, can you see how the rib is skewed? Because it's lower down here than here. And that's because of that twisted section.
It was my first go back with DPNs, though. Learnt lots from the project. I've already made adjustments with regards to ribbing and things, which meant that on my next hat, which you saw earlier on, there wasn't any holes. Oh, not holes, ladders on the joins. So that's really good. So it really did serve its purpose. So I'm perfectly happy whether it fits her or not. Enjoyed knitting it. Glad I finished it.
Yeah, absolutely. Not every piece of knitting can be something that ends up being, some amazing thing. It's all a kind of learning experience, isn't it? And every bit of knitting we do gives us more experience.
Definitely. Yeah. And speaking of knitting, I think we should get back for the second part of my favourite blanket, where we're going to be doing some knitting. Yes, my goodness, savour every moment, because there's only 2 episodes to go after this.
Yeah. But
let's get back now and enjoy the second part of the 10th episode of my favourite blanket.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of my favourite blanket and the beautiful Persicaria yarn. So I got it all dyed up in part 1, as you saw. I then brought it in once it had cooled down, gave it a lovely rinse in my favourite Eucalan lavender wool wash. I then hung it up on the line outside. It dried completely on the line. I do like drying yarn outside if I can. It just adds an extra bit of bounce, I always think, if you dry it in the sort of natural air. So yeah, we've got it all dry and we've got it here now to start knitting our next section. So that's really exciting. Here is the yarn all skeined up and looking beautiful. And this is what I wanted with the speckle. This is what I always want with speckled yarn. You know, I want to be able to see those speckles really clearly. And the background is just a very soft version of the colours that are in the speckles. So that turned out beautifully. And also that sort of murky green, I'd absolutely love it. It just, what it does add in that bronze in, it just dulls down everything and just gives that little hint of autumn, you know, when the leaves are just starting to yellow a tiny bit. So like, that came out perfectly, and the two paired together I think are going to knit up beautifully. So that's the two that are skeined up, and then I've got two here that I'm going to be working with. So that's our beautiful yarn. It's all soft and fluffy and dried in the lovely, what are we in now? Late summer, early autumn, we could possibly say, but maybe not. Oh, just wishful thinking. So it's time now to get this wound up, and then we can start knitting section 10 of our blanket. Okay, so here we go with our speckle skein. Let's get it wound up. One day I'm going to have the perfect swift and ball winder. There's quite a lot of ties on this yarn. I think there's 4 or 5, which is good for dyeing because then it helps it to stay, you know, well behaved, doesn't get too tangled. Right, we've just got one left, so that must be the one that's holding everything together. I don't know if I've ever mentioned these, but Dan bought me these ages ago. They're by Kohana, and they're like little snips. They were really expensive. I think he got them for me one Christmas or birthday. Do you know what? They're not very good. I don't like them. I think they're vastly overpriced, and I've never found them to be very good. The blades kind of slip the wrong way, and they won't go together. They're just on the wrong side of the blades, and then when you snip, they go past the point here. So I'm not really vastly impressed by that. Just an extra little bit of info for you. Right, now find the strand that's coming away from the outside, you know, that's facing you, because there'll be one that's coming away from the outside and then the other one will be on the inside. So find the one that's pulling away from the outside, and let's wind this up. Okay, my ball winder does not sound happy. It's wound this, oh my gosh, it's super tight on here. It's done a really bad job, so I think I'm gonna have to look for another one. Oh, hey ho. But anyway, it'll be fine because we're gonna knit it really quick into the blanket so it won't be sort of tightly wound. I don't like yarn that's tightly wound. So if you do wind them by hand, just be careful you don't wind too tightly. You don't want a golf ball, you know, it wants to have some squidge when you wind it. But that's our speckled wound. So I will go ahead now and do this lovely variegated tonal, and then we can get to the knitting. Right, so we have wound both of our skeins. I did actually rewind this. It was bothering me that it had wound so tightly and it just looked dreadful. And so I've rewound it. So all I did to do that was I pulled from the middle. I grabbed the strand that's coming out of the middle here and wound from the centre. and it just wound back perfectly. So I don't know what was going on there. A ball winder clearly had a moment, because this one has come out absolutely fine. So it reminded me of something actually that people do ask me occasionally, and I thought it'd just be relevant now with me saying that I pulled from the centre to wind this. And I do get asked often if I pull from the outside of a cake or from the inside when I knit, and I always pull from the outside. I never ever pull from the inside of a cake, and I've got a couple of reasons for that. One of them is I don't like that the cake sort of collapses and becomes sort of flat, doesn't it? And I find then that there's a chance that it could just all fall apart. And I know you can get those little cozy things, can't you? But that's not the main reason actually that I don't pull from the centre. The main reason is that I feel that when you pull yarn from the centre, I think it's adding another twist into it, because I don't know if this is just me in my brain, but I just feel like the way that it's wound in the centre like that, when you pull from the centre, I just feel like it pulls out in a twist, rather than when you pull from the outside, it's just pulling away, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, that's the main reason that I don't pull from the centre. I just feel like it adds another twist into your yarn, and that can affect the way that your stitches look. This is all just, might be just a fantasy in my head, I don't know, but it stood me in good stead, and it means that when you've got some leftovers as well, it's still in a nice little cake. It's not all sort of squashed and fallen apart because you've pulled from the middle. So now we can get on with the knitting, can't we? So here's my last section, and what we did on the last section is we turned that corner. So this, if you can see now, this is the actual correct orientation for the blanket. So here is the last section, and this is the corner. And what I really love about the way that I've done the sort of decreases on this, or constructed it if you like, is you get really sharp corners. Can you see that corner, how sharp it is? And I just love that, and the other corners are equally as sharp. It's just really satisfying to me to see that. I think that's just lovely. So yeah, here is what will be the top of the blanket here. So this is the long edge coming down with our fancy business, and this is going to be the top edge going across. So we're now going to carry on with that top edge, and then we're maintaining, we're decreasing every row in this section, but what that does is it creates that corner in the top. We are going to be doing exactly what we did in the last section. I'm trying to find the other end of my needle and I'm failing because I've got so much fabric. Where's the other end of my needle? I found it, yay! So we're working it exactly the same as the last section. So on every row, we are going to be knitting to the last 2 stitches and then working the lift over decrease. Now I have shown the lift over decrease several times before, so I'm sure you're familiar with it by now. So I'm not going to be showing you again today, but I have done it I think 2 or 3 times through this series, so like I said, I'm sure you're familiar. So yeah, we are going to, on every row, knit to the last 2 stitches and then do the lift over decrease, and you repeat. It is effectively a 2-row repeat, even though each row is the same. To make sure you end on the correct row, you should think of it as a 2-row repeat. So your right side and your wrong side, and I mark my right side just with a little locking stitch marker here. You can tell the right side from the wrong side because on the right side the transition is clean. On the wrong side you get the coloured pearl bumps from the previous colour showing. So that's how you can tell if you do ever lose track. So your right side is the one that's nice and clean with no apparent changes in your yarn colour. It's very sort of like, here's the yellow, here's the purplish and then the wrong side has that pearl bump. transition. So yeah, think of it as a 2-row repeat, but each row is the same. So I'm going to get going. I will show you again how I get started, and then I'm just going to carry on and finish this section. So you work that 2-row repeat until you have 166 stitches. So what we are doing now is we're working in reverse. So these stitch counts you will have already been working with. When we were increasing it, we were increasing to these stitch counts. We're now decreasing back down to these stitch counts. So if you kept a note previously, you'll see that that stitch count matches up with 1 when we were doing our increases. So yeah, keep going until you have 166 stitches on your needle. So let's get started, and then you can just carry on. So I've got my 2 yarns here. Pull off a little bit of the yarn. So as I've been doing with all the other sections, I'm going to work the first 4 stitches in my old yarn. And I've explained why I do this several times, but it's basically for neatness and for weaving in your ends, and also it helps, now we're in this section, it makes the decreases on the other end neater. I explained all that in the last episode. So there's our 4 stitches. We can move that one out of the way now and bring in the new one. So leave a tail for weaving in, and then I just put my needle in as if I'm going to knit, and then loop it around, and you are away. So that second stitch with the new yarn, just make sure you are knitting with the correct end of your yarn, and you're away. So on this first row, well, I say on this first row, they're all the same, aren't they, as I've explained. Just work to the last 2 stitches and then work that lift over decrease. Okay, so that is everything you need to know to knit your way through section 10. Can you believe we're in October already? I just think that's amazing. And I think the combination of these 2 knitting up, I'll be honest, I haven't swatched these because I changed that colour as I showed you before. I thought I'm going to take a flyer on it and just knit it with you, and I'm sure, you know, from all of the combinations that I've knit previously, I know it's going to work, so everything's cool. But just from seeing those first few stitches, what I think this section is going to look like is that yellowish greenish colour is just going to give that kind of transition into some more kind of rich autumnal colours. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to crack on with this now and start knitting my way through section 10, and I will see you next time for more My Favourite Blanket.
Now that was just wonderful. I love those rich colours.
Yes, and it's, you know, although we used really intense colours, where's my leftover bits? There they are. You know, you can see those really deep pops of colour, you know, the reds and the purple that we used in the speckled. When you knit it up, you know, it does look not delicate because you can see it, but it's not as in your face, because we've softened it with that background colour, and it's just perfect. And I think these 2 colours we've done for that are more autumnal now, this was September and this is October, it's definitely moving into a more muted palette. That might not always be the case for the next 2 sections, we shall wait and see. But I think it's working really well. It knit up absolutely lovely, and you can see the variations with the background colour. Sometimes you get really pale sort of sections, other times you see the green, and that's just perfect, isn't it, for that sort of 2-tone variegated leaf that's heading towards a tiny bit of autumn. So yeah, looks really lovely. So that's my section 10 completed. As with all the other sections, we've got a nice little chunk of yarn left, so it should be absolutely fine for differences in gauge and things like that. And yeah, just 2 sections to go, and then we'll have a completed blanket. I can't wait to sort of lay it all out and take photos of the finished blanket. It's going to be so exciting. We might have to go back in the woods, I think, for finished blanket shots. That seems appropriate.
So that's the end of another wonderful episode of My Favourite Blanket. Special
Yes.
edition is available to watch right now. And that means that next time is the penultimate episode. What's interesting is I make notes before the show so I know what's coming, and my spell check changed penultimate to ultimate.
Did it?
Both works. So it's the penultimate episode. Well, I hope the final episode is the ultimate episode.
Yeah.
No, who knows?
Who knows?
Because in the next episode of The Rise and Fall of the Monasteries, which is coming in our next video show, it is our final sort of abbey tour before we tell the story of the fall of the monasteries. The way we're going to tell the story of the fall of the monasteries is going to be something completely unique. We've never done anything quite like it before. On the video show, slightly nervous, very excited, big story to tell, but yes, it's going to be cool. Prior to that, though, next time we're back at Fountains Abbey, and we're going to be exploring Fountains Abbey as it was towards the end of the time of the monasteries. And it's a really cool story to tell, because the story there is pretty much the same in every place that you went to. But the great thing about Fountains is the history of it was written down in a much clearer and better way back in the day, so that we know now a lot more. Also, as well, there's been much more archaeological work done there, so we know a lot more about it. So it's going to be great second proper sort of go at Fountains Abbey, really sort of explore all the really cool bits that we didn't get to last time. So yeah, can't wait to show you that next time. Right now, though, it's time for the Endy Bits.
Endy Bits
So we've already mentioned what is the cowl called again?
is the self-striping September
Cowl.
knit along.
Cool.
Yes.
Excellent. That's underway right now. If you want to get involved, just follow the link in our show notes below. As Kay's already said, super busy, lots of exciting things.
Yeah, and if you want to post on Instagram, there is a hashtag that I've quoted in the Ravelry thread, but it's hashtag BB self-striping Cal 2023.
We've also just published the very latest issue of our magazine Knitability.
Yes.
And Kay wrote a lovely article all about Pride and Prejudice.
I did.
It's called Ode to Pemberley.
Yeah.
And if you want to read that, go now and get your copy of Knitability, because there's also some other superb articles. There's an article all about yoga and knitting,
Yeah.
which is really cool. There's even sort of pictures so that you can copy, which is really cool. But then there's also a great interview with crochet designer Alice Terry. Yeah, Alice Terry is her name. So that's really great. And
a
also
bit of crochet.
Yes. We get Marlene. We also get very excited about our upcoming Sockoween event. So Knitability is available right now. You mentioned your butterfly heel.
Yes.
You've just published your a brand new butterfly heel tutorial.
Have I?
Yes.
Oh, well done.
Kay's no idea. It's marvellous. So there's a brand new butterfly heel tutorial that's just come out right now. So that's really cool. And also next week, you'll be here with part 1 of your Freckled Whimsy yarn review.
Brilliant.
We'll then be publishing part 2 a few weeks after that.
Excellent.
You mentioned earlier you just filmed the second part.
Yes.
What I decided to do was hold off publishing the first part.
Right, okay.
Because historically we'd publish the first part and then it would be some time later the second part would come out. I thought I'll hold it back. So that it can go out quite close together.
Brilliant.
So you'll get the full Freckled Whimsy lowdown coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that's it. Don't miss our next radio show. Mentioned it earlier on. We'll be talking about our garden adventure, which is very exciting. It's going on right now.
Yeah.
And apart from that, folks, I hope you're well. And we'll see you
surviving the weather.
Yeah. We'll see you in 2 weeks for a brand new video show, which will feature, of course, that penultimate episode of The Rise and Fall of the Monasteries. We'll see you then.
See you soon, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Who's it sitting and knitting? It's Dan and Kay, the bakery prayers. Enthusiasm's not quitting for Dan and Kay, the bakery prayers. They'll take you to fabulous places of which their favorites they'll share. You better buy a pattern and get yourself a bakery pair. You'll find yourself in a castle castle to sit and watch the bakery prayers. What's on your shelf or what's in